Hello and welcome to Soul Love with Kimness. I am Kim van der Zande, your host, and I'm super excited to share another episode of Soul Love with you, where we share inspirational and empowering stories from the heart. We talk about the beauty and the shadows as both are part of the ascension journey, to remind you that you are powerful, you are magical, and to have trust in what you feel to be true deep within. Enjoy this next episode of Soul Love. Before we start the next Soul Love conversation, I want to invite you to check out my amazing book, Activating the Flower of Love, a sacred guide for manifesting your deepest desires and highest calling. This sacred book, filled with powerful tools and activations, will guide you to open your heart to the beauty and wisdom within you, empowering you to create the life you deeply desire from the foundation of love. You can find Activating the Flower of Love in all the major online and offline bookstores in ebook or paperback, or you can check it out through my website, kimness.nl, where you can also discover the different ways of working with me and the latest updates on new starting programs. Enjoy this next episode of Soul Love. Welcome everyone to a new episode of Soul Love, and today I have the honor and I'm very excited to share a sacred conversation with Victoria Hart, and I welcome you within this beautiful space.
Oh, thank you so much, Kim. It's my pleasure to be here with you and everyone who's tuning in today or at a later point in their lives. So thank you.
You're so welcome. And it's really great to share another conversation with you. We already had a beautiful one at your Freedom Summit a couple of weeks back, but it's beautiful. And I love your last name because Hart, as you pronounce it in the Netherlands, it's love or it's our heart. So I think it's really beautiful. And it's also about what this podcast is about, or these conversations. Like, to start, like, what sparked your soul love? What sparked you to step into this journey of awakening and ascension and sharing your gifts with the world and your light in the way you are doing?
Well, as you said, the clue's in the name.
Yes.
And
I
it
love
took
that.
me,
Yes.
I guess it took me, getting into my adult life to kind of start to recognize, the power behind the name and the importance of that and how we can start to apply that to our soul mission and soul purpose.
Yeah.
And certainly for me, part of my journey has been about staying or keeping a heart open, even through, tumultuous times and experiences and challenges, and being able to, still hold that open heart and that love for humanity and for myself has been a really big lesson. And of course, then it's also part of my gift is being able to help others open their hearts and start to operate their lives from that heart-based, heart-centered living rather than from the logical mind, always trying to figure it out. And, we're kind of conditioned to believe that we have to work hard and constantly be busy and at it all the time for success, and actually success doesn't come without blood, sweat and tears. And I don't believe that's entirely true. I do think that when we're working hard, it's not necessarily, it's when we're in our hearts, it's because we're working hard because we're passionate and we're loving what we do.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't even feel like work. We might be doing a lot or being a lot in that space, but it's a different energy. And certainly part of my path was learning to recognize when I'm coming from that conditioned mind that this is the way we do things, from how we've been either brought up or what society tells us is the right way to do things, to really start to become more and more aware of, well, hang on, where am I coming from? Am I coming from my heart, or am I in fear, or am I in my head? Am I in my personality, trying to create something because of, my ego wants and needs? So yeah, it's been a big journey.
Yes, I get, but you've shared already beautiful things, because it's really, sometimes I love that your name, I think it's also beautiful, like your soul, like you chose this name in a way, and it's guiding you in beautiful ways to open your heart, because there's the key. The key is really in opening our hearts, but it also means sometimes that we feel more and that we experience more, and what I love in what you're sharing, because sometimes there is the vision, like, if I follow my heart and align with my purpose, I don't have to do anything anymore. No, that's not per se.
Right.
But it doesn't drain you. You're in this passionate stage where you're just passionate about what you're doing, and then it gives you energy. And of course, we are constantly being invited to stretch out of our comfort zone and to grow, but there's an inner drive instead of like a drive from the mind or a drive from fear or from
Mm.
what society wants us to do. And I think that's a beautiful message, like, because otherwise we have this image, no, everything will always go in the way of, okay, it's just I'm sitting and everything will happen. No, it's really, it's also the inner work that we're doing and that we're bringing forward. Yeah. But what guided you really into stepping into this space of coming to your heart, and because it's like also an unlearning of things, unlearning of conditioning, unlearning, and how what did help you to constantly come back to, okay, I'm in this space of opening my heart, and I'm, yeah, to let my heart lead.
Good question. I think if I look back, I do feel that as a child, I was always very aware and very connected to my source energy and had that kind of guidance. But I grew up in a family that wasn't connected and was quite dysfunctional. But of course, growing up, I never saw that. That was my normal.
Mhm.
Um, and I guess looking back, I did feel like I didn't really fit in a lot of times. So there wasn't really any emotional support really in my family. So I found it difficult to regulate my emotions and to understand what they were showing me or where they were coming from.
Mhm.
Because a lot of the times, if I did have an emotional reaction to something, I would be met with, well, there's something wrong with me and I shouldn't be feeling like this, and what I'm thinking of feeling is wrong.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the time, well, it created this, a lot big self-doubt. I wasn't then able to trust myself, why am I feeling this if somebody else is telling me that it's not right, or I'm making it up, whatever. So I think that was a big part of my personal journey. And yeah, building my self-esteem again. But a pivotal moment for me was in one of my former lives. I was in the television industry and always very passionate about people and planet and telling stories that make a difference. And I was made redundant from a big television company. And
Mhm.
I thought, yay, I'm going to use my redundancy money and I'm going to become this documentary filmmaker. That was my
Wow. Yes.
my my dream. So
Yeah.
I pursued that for a little while and plowed a bit of, some of my redundancy money into that. And not particularly successfully. I didn't realize at the time it's quite it's a difficult market to enter.
Yes.
But what happened was I ended up unexpectedly being introduced to a survivor of modern slavery. And it sent me on this, just in this rabbit hole, really, as I started to, first of all, see what was maybe happening in the external world and how, I was, I guess, it brought up all these emotions that this happens in our world. But
Yeah.
then what I started to see is that actually I was being shown, certainly from my own personal journey, that, as I said earlier, this dysfunction in my own family that I had perceived as normal.
Yeah.
So it kind of shook up, I was in a bit of a shock and
Mhm.
didn't
Yeah.
handle it particularly well, because it was like, oh my God,
Yes.
all of this stuff is happening. What is this? So it actually, and that's what set me on the path to becoming a coach and to supporting
Mhm.
people to get into their hearts, because it not only awoke me to how I had, I guess, yeah, been molded to suit the structure of the family. And then I started to, be able to see that, well, this actually is normal in society.
Yes.
We're kind of molded either in our families, and then we get a job and we take on a role that's been
Mhm.
created to fill, the needs of the structure. And so we fill that role, and if we do it well, we get rewarded with, money or status. And if we don't please, the superiors, then the whole shame and punishment system comes in. So I
Mhm.
started to make these connections through that meeting. And yeah, I guess that started to, it became very challenging because, of course, I was being invited, my soul was inviting me to individuate myself from the family.
Yeah.
Up until that point, I guess I'd just been an extension of of my caretakers. And so I was trying to find who I was. And with that came some challenges because, and maybe you've experienced this as well, but when you try to break out of a mold,
Yes.
people don't like it. It's
Yeah.
suddenly like, well, hang on a minute, who's this new person that
Yes.
used to be the people pleaser, or I used to
Yes.
put everyone else's needs before mine. I didn't know what my needs were because I'd never really had a chance to look at them. And so, yeah, that became quite challenging. And it probably took me a good few years because I would loop back in and
Mm,
again. And
yeah.
I think because of the open heart, I would come with it like, well, maybe I'll try it this way, or maybe if I say it that
Mhm.
way, or maybe if I do this, and just nothing, seemed to get through.
No.
And what my soul did start as a little whisper, like, you need to leave, you need to leave. And
Yeah.
I was a bit like, really? Are you asking me?
Yes.
Is
Yeah.
this really what you're asking me to do? So yeah, kind of did it, then dipped my feet
Yeah.
back in. And what I learned, is each time you go back into a situation that is not supporting your soul growth, it just becomes harder and harder.
Yes. Yeah.
So finally kind of broke free,
Mhm.
if we call it that. And I think that's partly why I help teach people about finding their own personal freedom, because
Yeah.
it is essentially freedom from discomfort, mental, emotional, and physical dis-ease.
Mhm. Yes. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. And I think it's also beautiful in a way, even though when we're in the middle of it, it's not easy, but how our lives or our soul is constantly guiding us and
Yeah.
bringing us experiences to remember, because it's all a journey of remembering. And I love as you share, like also your growing up. And I think a lot of us, whether it's in our family or whether as we're going through school, because there we're also conditioned and we need to be silent and we need to be listened to the teacher and we need to be like everyone else. And this conditioning of, okay, when you're doing something good you get a reward, and when you're doing something wrong you get punished. It's this whole system, and it's understanding how, where a lot of us we're still working through these things to harmonize. And it's even understanding the physicality of when we're between, I think, 0 and 7 years, we're almost like this sponge. So everything we see around us we just take as our normal, as our truth, but it's not per se our truth, but it becomes our conditioning. And then we can feel like, as an adult, why am I keep repeating these patterns, or why am I in this dysfunction relationship or dysfunction job, or why am I allowing this to happen? But it's understanding that these roots sometimes come from very early childhood, and then it's really coming into harmony with that. But our soul is constantly guiding us into experiences to see like, okay, this is not working anymore.
Yeah.
But it's also, I noticed it in my own journey as well. It's sometimes alone, because we change, we start to rediscover who we are. But in that, indeed, our the people around us that we're used to, okay, we're pleasing, or we're trying to be like everyone else, to not be a part of, or to not lose our part of the group anymore or anything.
Mm.
And then it's suddenly we're standing alone. But it's also understanding that those are phases, because
Yeah.
that's what I noticed for myself. The more I became myself, the more I connected with beautiful souls around the world that lifted me up instead of kept me in the old paradigm and kept me in the. But sometimes it is truly allowing one door to close before the other can open, and that's scary. And sometimes we start to peek around the old door, like seeing, okay, maybe I should go back, but we can't, because we already tasted the new, and we already in this new state of being, and we are already in rediscovering our true essence. So it's really, it doesn't fit anymore. But it's also our human self that sometimes feels like, okay, the old felt so comfortable, but from your new perspective it doesn't work anymore. But that creates a disbalance, because sometimes we want to go back to this comfortable state instead of this new, because then everything is new, how we approach the world and what we feel and what we experience. And it's beautiful, but it's also sometimes also scary. So I think it's, yeah, but it's truly, and I get when you see those experiences in the world, and you notice that it's also really like, okay, what is my truth, and how can I contribute, and how can I make people aware of the power they have within themselves. And it starts with loving yourself, because when you love yourself you honor your boundaries, you honor
Right.
your truth, your values, and that's how you step into the world. So it's such a key to come back to this central place of, yeah,
Mhm.
harmony. Yeah.
Well, and as you were saying, peeking back around the door, which I did a few
Yes.
times,
Yes.
because it is like you kind of, that's your perceived safety. Oh, I need to belong to
Yes.
this tribe, otherwise I am all on my own. And
Yeah.
I think one of the things that I discovered was actually I'm not alone if I'm connected.
Yes.
Because even though it's unseen, as you know, we've shared from the
Yes.
beginning of this conversation, is we are constantly being guided. We've got people, you know, unseen guides supporting us and guiding us and our divine self. And then we're not alone. And
Mm.
going back to, you know, that feeling that we have to do everything on our own and we have to navigate life on our own, actually that's when we realize that no, I'm only alone if I'm coming from that conditioned
Yes.
personality. But
Mm.
once I'm connected, I'm never alone. I've
Mm.
always got support and guidance. And as you shared, once you let go of things that aren't serving your soul growth, you're opening the space to
Yeah.
invite in people that are supporting you. And I
Yes.
think one of the things that I discovered a few years ago when I was going through this is kind of looking in the mirror and just seeing that, oh my gosh, like the life had kind of drained out of me. I kind of felt like my spirit was just dying, and it was in that moment I had to choose myself. I
Mm.
had to choose, I want a life. You
Yeah.
know, I want to live and I want a great life. And I'm
Yes.
not going to get it if I keep cycling in these situations that aren't supporting that growth.
Yes. And that's a key moment, because I recognize those certain patterns in my life as well. And we can have the awareness that they're unhealthy, and we can have the awareness like, this is not what I want. But at one point we will have a breakthrough where we feel now it's enough. And then things start to shift. But it's also honoring again with compassion and love. Sometimes we need to go through certain cycles a couple of times to really feel like, okay, I'm ready to let
Yeah.
go. I'm ready to close this door finally and no longer peek. And I'm ready to step into my new life. But I love as well, we're always connected and always guiding, because when we look back at our life, so now take a silent moment and look back at your life, but then see how many pivotal moments there were where suddenly you got an inspiration, or there was a beautiful message on the internet, or maybe something in a beautiful animal that comes by and brings you a message or an energy, or but there were, like, for every one of us, I think there are these moments where you feel like, okay, this was so serendipity, or this was so, I couldn't ever imagine that this would have happened. And it's
Right.
understanding that there's so much more.
Mm.
But I think the next phase of our journey as well is really stepping into this multidimensionality of our being. We're not only this physical body, and this physical body is powerful and beautiful, but there's so much more beyond the mind understanding and beyond what we can see with our senses and understand. And yeah, it's really tapping into this bigger aspect of our being that is always there, because
Yeah.
it is our mind that thinks we're separate, but it's our soul that knows we're always connected, always guided, always supported. And yeah, I think that's beautiful. Thank you for bringing that into the space. Yes.
No,
Yeah.
nice, nice.
Yeah. But it's really coming back to this opening our heart. And because I think that's an important key as well, because it's not always easy. And it's understanding that it's coming back to this space of, okay, feeling. Because as you shared as well, honoring your body, honoring your emotions. And a lot of us, when we're growing up, especially in schools and everything, it would be good if it was a class or
Yes.
teaching where we would be learned to listen to the message of our body, of our soul, of our emotions, because there's power in it. And I think especially this journey back to our purest self is getting to know ourselves again, like honoring your emotions. And as your heart opens, I don't know how that was for you, but as your heart opens, it also is inviting us to feel and experience more. But there is a message in it, there is wisdom in it,
Yeah.
there is power. Yeah.
That's the navigation, really,
Yes.
isn't it? It's the guidance system that comes
Yeah.
online, and you know, we'll know, are we feeling contracted and want to retreat, or are we leaning in and wanting more? And one of the things I share is you know, if we look at fear and excitement, they're the same energy, but
Yeah.
we're our brain is wired to instantly look for the negative. So if we have a feeling that it's like, oh, this feels a bit, you know, my tummy's churning or something, we'll
Mm.
go into the fear. Whereas actually it could be, and it is when we're having an expansion, of course, we're going into the unknown. We don't know what's going to happen. That's part of the adventure. So if we can just train ourselves to be open to the excitement of, oh, what's about to, you know, come towards me? What am I
Yes.
being invited to open to, and kind of trust that actually it's good, or whatever comes, I can choose and navigate how I respond to whatever's coming. I think that's a, you know, a powerful and totally different way to approach how to navigate life's experiences. And I had something coming in, but it's gone for a minute, so maybe it'll come in.
Yes. Yeah. I love that. But it's understanding it's a choice. And that really asks our dedication and our focus, because our mind is programmed in a certain way from our many lifetimes on this earth and many other experiences. But it's coming back to this choice. I love that, as you shared, like we have a choice in every situation, in everything that is happening, however challenging life is, we still have a choice. How do you choose to see it? How do you choose to experience it? How do you choose to cope with what is happening? And because it's really also understanding that with in each and every moment we have a choice to program our future, to create our next step. So do we want to create it from fear or from love and openness? And so that's beautiful. Yeah, thank
Yeah,
you.
and you've just reminded me what it was that was
Yay.
coming in. Because of course, when we have experiences that maybe aren't what we hoped for, or they leave us feeling sad or angry or whatever that emotion
Yeah.
is, that's when we tend to close our hearts,
Yeah.
and we'll close it to the world, we'll close it to maybe the person that triggered that in us. And if we can, and we close it to ourselves, we start to shut down our own love for ourselves and judgment, and start berating ourselves. That's probably a big one for many of us. And if we can just keep our hearts open and navigate it as you've just described it so beautifully, is hang on, there's a message here for me. I have a choice.
Yeah.
And I don't have to keep playing out the same painful patterns.
Yeah.
And what I started to see, in the world is really this is essentially what it's like, a play on shadows, because people are, many people haven't chosen to, look at the behaviors, the learned behaviors. They think that is actually them. And,
Yes.
not even just from our early childhood conditioning. A lot of it was brought in from ancestral lifetimes. Whatever wasn't
Yeah.
healed in our ancestors just gets passed down the line, until one of us in the family
Yes.
line stops and says, hang on, it stops with me. I'm not going to keep carrying this playing this forward. And so if we can, it's part of creating this beautiful world that we all know is possible, and some of us are living it,
Yes.
um, is actually recognizing I have a choice. Where am I responding from?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what are we giving energy? Because that's also a thing I needed to learn in my journey, is like, okay, we have these sometimes challenging moments, but still I have a choice in what do I give it energy? Because this challenge is a manifestation in whatever way you see it, from past thinking, past experiences, family lineages, even from past lifetimes. It can have many roots. But by me giving it energy, I'm also projecting it in my future. Or I
Right.
can indeed feel like, okay, with love and compassion, I see you, I acknowledge you, but I choose to let you go because you're no longer serving the direction I'm desiring to go, or the vision I have, or what my heart yearns for. And then it's understanding this pivotal moment. Yes, we have these moments, but they are choice points, and we can choose to give it energy, and by that we bring it with us, or we can choose to let go in harmony, in love, and really take on this new path of growth and expansion and compassion and nurturing ourselves. Because it's, again, I think also in change, sometimes it's like, okay, even this journey of ascension, I need to do this, I need to fix this, or I need to. But again, it comes back to compassion, because this is not another job. This is not it needs to become a way of living. It needs to become an embodiment of your light, of your truth. But that happens with softness, with compassion, not with the hard force where the whole world is almost programmed to do. It's not the strong, manly, now is the time for the divine feminine for me, like to really step into the space of softness and compassion and authenticity and vulnerability, because in this space we can embrace all we are, and we can elevate, and we can grow and expand. And so I think that's a beautiful message as well, because it's so important. This like, even whatever is happening in your world in this now moment, as you're tuning into this podcast, you have a choice to do something different, to choose a different vibration, or to just enjoy your cup of tea, or take a beautiful walk. And by that, you're changing your energy and your dynamic and creating a different future. So I think, as you shared, the pivotal thing of understanding how we truly have this power within us to change our next steps, to change our future, and to not let our past or our family lineage per se define how our lives need to be. No, let go with love and compassion and softness, and then
Mhm.
move forward. So I think that's beautiful. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, you described that really well. And what was coming through as you were sharing was, one of the things I noticed through this self-inquiry was behaviors that were like, oh, my dad does that, or my mom, this is from my mom, and starting to can't think of the word,
Yes.
but let go of things that had become, that I'd associated as mine, that actually weren't mine. They were just behaviors, again, learned behaviors or learned
Yeah.
responses to situations. And then the more you let go of that, and the more part of you starts to show up. And
Mhm.
even that can be a little bit uncomfortable because it's a bit messy, because
Yes.
it's like, oh, hang on, I'm not that person. I'm not that. Who am I? And so then you're trying to navigate from a new space, and sometimes the words might not come out right, or the behaviors might be a bit awkward because you're also trying to let go. I mean, for me, it was like not being the people pleaser, but because I was so used to forming relationships from that space,
Yes. Yeah.
how do I now form a relationship where I'm still holding my own
Mhm.
without feeling like, oh, I've got to become, the over carer? So that was certainly a bigger challenge for me.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, because we're like, it's also understanding as we're a certain age, or we've done this for many, many years. So we're creating whole new dynamics, and we change, and then other people respond differently to that. And it's really, sometimes then it's easy to just go on a world trip and we can be this new person. And but that's not the reality. In the end, we need to also embody this in our everyday life and really connect. But it's letting go of so many identities. And I think when we truly look through the lens of love to everything that is happening in our lives, what is really our truth and what is really all the identities. I also had that as being a mom and a wife and a parent and an entrepreneur, and all of these things, being
Yeah,
like a
masculine
daughter.
or
And
feminine, yeah, the roles. Yeah,
there
yeah.
are so many roles, but I like, in the end, we're just this free soul that wants to experience, that wants to express, and all these labels, all these boxes are just of the collective of, like, that doesn't have to be our truth. But
Mm.
then when you try to break out of these boxes, it's suddenly the whole world that is looking, okay, what are you doing? This is not normal. And then it's really understanding that you need to stay confident in your centeredness, because some people will not always respond lovingly as you
No.
come back to your truth. And again, you, like, I also had that pattern of people pleasing, but when you suddenly don't do that anymore, some people can become very angry because they don't, yeah, they don't get the juice that they get before, they received before. So it's understanding that as you choose you, for some people it's also a loss because they suddenly don't have this person that is constantly pleasing them or constantly in a way overgiving. But it's not because you're doing something wrong. And I think as we're transforming, as we're growing and expanding, it's understanding again to be compassionate with ourselves but also with others, because they're responding from, in the end it is a loss. So we can have compassion for them losing this people pleasing person, but it doesn't mean that we have to go back into this old pattern. We're not responsible for that. We, in essence,
Mm.
are responsible for ourselves. And when we can give from overflow, it also supports the people around us. But it's a whole different dynamic than what we all were taught, or yeah.
No, that's right. And, the responsibility, that's a key word for me, because I realized, and I didn't see myself as controlling because it's very subtle, but it was having this over responsibility for the people in my family. Um, and in some ways, if I was feeling uncomfortable because of, the way I was expected to show up to suit the family needs,
Yeah.
that was me then trying to break free of that, was trying to change them and getting them to see my perspective. And so it's just this, back and forth battle. So it was
Yeah.
just recognizing that actually the only responsibility I have to myself. I'm not responsible for other people's choices and decisions. And
Yeah.
sometimes that can be difficult to accept and allow them to, to make their own choices
Mhm.
if you don't, like them or agree with them. But
Yeah.
actually, in being just responsible for you, you start to give people that freedom to be responsible for them. And you're
Yes.
letting go of that codependency and becoming more interdependent. And you can hold that space for others if they choose to rise. Or, in some cases, we have to make those decisions to, our time together has come to an end, and we
Mhm.
let them go.
Yeah.
But I also just share quickly that I did spend a couple of years living abroad, and I always laugh to myself because the analogy I realized was I was obviously trying to escape from my life that wasn't working. So I thought, right, pack my bags, go and live somewhere else, and that,
Yes.
that would solve the problem. And it's like you open your suitcase, it's like, no, the problems are still there.
Yes, I
They
took
come,
it with me.
come
Yes.
along with you. And it's not until
Yes.
you really turn in and face
Yeah.
yourself that you really start to create that new
It
story of
is.
your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I went on the world trip 2010, I think, but it's understanding everywhere you go, you are. And in the end, the world around you is a projection of what is happening within, however uncomfortable it is. But it's being compassionate with everything that is happening here and loving all of you because it will be there. So it's also sometimes when you break a relationship, but you haven't changed the pattern in yourself, then suddenly in a
Mm.
way you attract the same relationship in a different way. But still, the universe, your soul, is trying to give you a message. And I think that's important. Like we can travel the world. And of course, it's beautiful to be in this vibration. But in the end, if we stay there long enough, the old patterns will come because they're a part of who we are. And it's time to, with an open heart, look at all of us so that we can change the dynamic, so we can change the patterns that are underneath all of that. And yeah, I think that's a beautiful key. But also with feeling alone, because sometimes we can be in a room filled with people, we can feel very alone, but that is the connection with ourselves. And it's not like sometimes we are afraid of losing people, but it's understanding like when you're in a group with souls or in a group with like, how do you truly feel and how do you truly, and it's this inner connection that we're yearning. And from this inner connection and this self-love, we can have a totally different dynamic. Yeah, so it's truly,
Absolutely.
and it's also then also the dynamic with other people change. So it's really a power, the solution, the energy, it's all within ourselves, and by that we change
Yeah.
many patterns. Yeah.
And it's finding that balance. I mean, I remember when I was a teenager, the thought of phoning up friends, and there was one day I remember that I phoned up friends to see what they were up to on a Saturday, and they were all busy. And I was just like, 11 o'clock in the morning, and the thought of, oh no, I've got, nothing to do all day and I have to spend it on my own. It was like, I was horrified. It was awful. I couldn't face it. And then as I learned to love myself more, I actually flipped more the other way. And then it was
Yeah.
more like I wanted to spend more time with myself and not with other people. But then at some point, that yearning for that connection of, that physical connection came again. So it's finding that balance of recognizing what your needs are. And I know for me, I need that time out just to, for
Mm-hmm.
me, and then I come back and connect again. And that's a much healthier pattern for me.
Yes, yeah, I think that's good. And because then we can also hear, I also have that, like, then you have time to listen to these whispers of your soul and of your emotions. And it's really recalibrating time so that we can even be more in connection with others. And yeah, I think that's beautiful. So as we're almost coming to a place of completion, if you want to know how to work with Victoria and find out beautiful, and also the summit that is coming up soon already again. So I think it's beautiful. I will place the link the moment it's there, place it here underneath, but you can find all her information below this video or audio, whatever way you are tuning in. And if there's one last message for the time and space we are in this ascension journey of Earth that you would give to everyone tuning in, what would it be? An empowering message or a word or a quote or whatever you feel guided?
I think, and I talk a lot about creating a new story for yourself. And, maybe people are kind of like, why does she keep saying the same thing? And the reason I keep saying it is I want it to land that the life, generally the life we've been living is the one that we've created from our conditioning. And so it's not really our true self. And, we can go to the end of our life living like that and never really fully feeling like we've lived or, done all the things that our heart yearns for. And so it's about recognizing that part of our birthright is to have that life, and it comes from the heart. What does our heart desire? What is our heart's dreaming and passion? Because that is also why we're living this life now, why come into this physical body now, because we have a soul path and a soul mission and a puzzle piece to play in the whole collective with, with everybody else. And, if we're not playing our piece, our play, in our soul's essence, then that is part of what is creating the suffering and the discomfort in our reality and in our interactions in the world, and that's what we're seeing playing out on the world stage. So I think the message is to recognize that if something's not working, if you're getting to a crossroads in your life, and as we've shared in this conversation, if we keep going back trying to make it work and it's still not working, that's a clear sign that, okay, your soul is yearning for something more. It's waking up and it wants you to take a leap of faith in a way. And that can be scary, and so that's why it is important to have some support like him or myself
Yeah.
to help you get through those challenging first hurdles, should we say,
Yes.
so that then you can kind of feel like you can do it alone. And it's kind of like you said, unlearning everything that you've learned, but also like a child, we're learning to walk again or learning to walk. And we might fall and stumble a few times, but that's okay. And maybe our carer will help us up again, and then we're free to run, and we can learn on our own and create our own lives.
I think that's beautiful. Yeah, it's really giving ourselves permission to follow these passions, to follow our heart, and to follow this excitement. And because otherwise, indeed, we're 5 years further and we think, okay, should I? Why am I still doing the same? So I think that's a beautiful, empowering message. And I want to thank you for sharing your light and for sharing the sacred conversation. And everyone tuning in, I want to thank you for tuning in. And I'm really looking forward to connecting with you in the next Soul Love podcast. So for now, much love and see you next time. Bye. Thank you for joining this episode of Soul Love. If you want to find out more about what we do, you can find it below. And I'll see you in the next episode. Much love.